Triumphant Light has just come out in Pokemon Pocket TCG, but still we have a good gauge for what the best decks are shaping up to be. So let's see what is going on here. We have a ton of tournaments that have been recorded since the new set. And if we look at the tier list, we do have to wait a bit longer for a better picture of the tier list, at least a full week before we see other decks potentially dropping and going up. But still, we have good win rates and good data, as I could show you here on the top decks page. As we sort by the March season, we could see a better view of how tournaments are shaping up here and what the tier list will likely be turning into. And at the moment, Leafeon EX Celebi EX as one deck is supposedly the best deck, or closely tied, very close with Palkia and Ace Arceus EX, Dialga EX, even Darkrai EX Magnezone is up there. It actually looks like Leafeon is replacing Executor, which was currently the best deck in the game, and we could look at the win rates for that. Now, let's quickly look at what's been getting first place. I think it's a better gauge to see the total decks top in tournaments than getting first place, but still, boom. Palkia EX is the deck that's getting the most first places. Articuno is getting first places also because it did get boosted up by the new set. So let's dive deep into each deck type, including the win rates for those that are reasonable to look at, and see what has changed with the decks. So we could start off from here. I think a good look could be Charizard. Why is Charizard doing kind of well recently? Is anything new? Well, if we look at here, we could just see the highlight here. I don't see anything new in the deck, but what is new is what they're now playing against. So here's a recent tournament top and deck, and if we go on to the Charizard EX breakdown here, we could check out the win rates. And the win rates being quite favorable against, obviously, Executor Celebi EX, which is not a new deck, but the newly released Leafeon EX Celebi, we got a 63% win rate with Charizard, and the brand new Arceus EX Crobat, we have a 62% win rate. Now, the newer decks we're not doing well against, even though you may think Articuno is not a new deck, it is newly boosted. So I think we'll actually look at that next, as we only have a 20% win rate against a water deck. Shocking, I know. 28% win rate against Arceus EX, Dialga EX, and then a 40% win rate against Darkrai EX Magnezone, and a 42% win rate against Palkia EX, which I think is actually not that bad for us being a fire deck weak to water. So let's check out what is looking good with Articuno EX. Let's get the context of where it is up here. Articuno is, it's like a top 5 deck. It really is up there. So we're going to jump from Charizard EX up to Articuno EX to see what is going on. So we see at least 2 of them in the tournament top and deck list are playing Palkia within the main deck here. And we can bring up the deck type breakdown by clicking on any of the decks here. We'll see a new card. Finally, something new. Irida. Now, Irida heals for 40 damage from each of your Pokemon that has any water energy attached to it. So if you were to quickly gloss over this, you would incorrectly be thinking this heals water Pokemon. That is untrue. It could heal any Pokemon that has water energy on it. So if you were to be playing Magnezone, which doesn't require you to play lightning energy in your deck, you instead play water energy, and then you put a water energy on your Magnezone, you're now healing it with Irida, and we're going to see that in some strategies like in Leafeon. A full grass deck is actually playing with water because Leafeon is supplying with the grass energy. So it's a little bit of a spoiler as we get later into what's good here, and it's just actually insane that Irida is worded this way. I guess she's supposed to be a water or ice type gym leader, but she's supporting everyone that has a water energy on it. Now, Irida, of course, is going to be comboed up with Misty. And what's crazy about the Irida's release is that no longer is grass going to be the main deck type that is going to be benefiting from Erica. Erica is a huge boost for grass-type decks, healing for 50 damage. So this, in addition to Potion, gave the deck great sustainability, but now water decks have Irida, in addition to Potion, to also help up with sustaining your Pokemon. Misty, of course, giving you that turn 1, or I should say even like a turn 0 chance of popping off right away. You get the triple coin flip heads right away, and you could be blizzarding for 80 damage plus 10 damage to all the bench Pokemon. That could straight up just win a game right then and there. Super broken. I think if there were to ever be a ban list or an errata in game, Misty would maybe be on the chopping block, or maybe they're cool with crazy randomness happening. We do know that ranked battles is happening at the end of March, so I do expect with ranked battles that they're maybe going to have a heavier emphasis on possibly balancing the game, maybe with the ban list. I actually don't know how it's done in the TCG, so maybe in the comments you could let me know, is there a ban list for the TCG? What do they do to balance the competitiveness of the physical card game? Now, moving on, well, I'm not moving on. Let's click on Articuno right here. So here's the breakdown on how the deck is being played. With Palkia not being the most prevalent way to play it, 85% are not playing it. We have a top sample deck here. We could see a first place deck list right here without Palkia. So you can see on the hover there, and then here's first place with Palkia. Another first place. I mean, this deck is doing quite well. Now let's check out the win rates. Charizard, 80% win rate, clapping up Charizard. 74% win rate against Darkrai EX Magnezone. 60% win rate against Palkia EX. And then it struggles against Pachirisu. Pachirisu, well, we are weak to lightning. So Pachirisu is going to be absolutely dominating this deck with a near 80% win rate against Articuno, as Articuno has a 22% win rate against them. And we also don't have that great of a win rate against Executor. You know, it's not that bad. And then 44 to 45% win rate against Leafeon EX, Celebi EX. It's kind of close to 50%. It's almost a coin flip matchup, I'd say. I would expect this to be either going up or down randomly as the meta further develops. And then we have Arceus EX, Dialga EX, where Articuno is even closer to potentially a coin flip matchup win rate there. And we'll soon get to that deck list. So that is how Articuno EX is being played. And what's really good about this is that if you don't want to really dive deep into the newer Pokemon set and you're afraid of power creeping all the older cards with the newer cards being straight up better, well, this shows that one of the first ever released cards is a newly relevant deck today thanks to a brand new supporter card. So I think that in terms of accessibility, that is really good on Pokemon Pocket, especially that Palkia does not completely replace Articuno as another solo Pokemon deck, where it also, if you don't understand how the solo Pokemon deck type works, something like this would not work out well in the physical card game because you would continually have to mulligan your hand until you have a basic Pokemon that's playable. And every time you mulligan, your opponent's going to get a greater advantage, where I believe they have the option to draw additional cards, or they force you to start off with less cards. I forget exactly what it is, but it is not good for you. But in Pokemon Pocket, it's guaranteed to have a basic Pokemon with no downside, like a mulligan tied to it. Now, let's see what else is good for the broader overview. I don't think anything new with Infernape is going on besides potentially having a good matchup. But, oh, you know, we have some art. Actually, we should take a gander here. Look at that. Infernape is in the meta, kind of, with Heatran. I talked about Heatran being good as literally you don't even need fire energy for this to be good because it's 110 health for a basic Pokemon. And then if you have Arceus, you could just retreat this after it takes up enough damage when you're ready after building up your bench. Now for this deck, they're using a basic Arceus without the EX, so it's not going to give them 2 points. It's got Power Blast for 100 damage. Discard a random energy from this Pokemon to deal that 100, where otherwise you have the Arceus EX at 140 basic Pokemon health there. With the Ultimate Force, once you have enough Pokemon on your bench, the Ultimate Force for 3 energy could deal up to 130 damage, and also we're unaffected by any special conditions. And then the Infernape is going to be very swift, similar with the Heatran. Heatran could jump off the active spot by turning its retreat cost to 0, and Infernape is already at a 0 retreat cost. Being able to Flare Blitz for 140, and then on the very next turn after, you have to discard all your fire energy from this Pokemon, pull back your Infernape, and then start building from there. I guess swap Infernape with Arceus, then maybe Ultimate Force them for 130, and then whatever happens from there. Are we playing Leaf in this deck? Let's look at the total breakdown here. Is Leaf that popular? Leaf's actually not that popular, but we're using the ability of Dawn. What's really good about Dawn is if you have Infernape hitting for 140, you're now at 0 energy. On the next turn, you can only give it 1 more fire energy, where A card like Charizard, you could give it, let's say, start it off with 6 energy before you whip it out in your active spot, so that when it detaches energy, since it doesn't detach all of its energy, it's going to be able to attack multiple times in a row. But with the power of Dawn, mostly being used at 2 here, Dawn's going to allow the Infernape turn after turn in a row, being able to continually Flare Blitz the opponent. So again, an older card that actually wasn't very good at all is now a potential meta threat, especially with Leafeon entering the meta. You can Infernape Blitz it for 160 damage onto their grass Pokemon, which will help mitigate things like, let's say, a Giant Cape if they were to give their Pokemon more health. So I'm happy we actually took a quick little look at Infernape and how the deck's being played here. I should also talk more about the Heat Ran ability. If this Pokemon has damage on it, it does 40 more damage, so it's even scarier to want to attack into this. And what's really cool about this, now that I'm just seeing it all connect together, is you think you're safe if it's at 0 energy, but with the threat of Dawn, this from 0 energy, within 1 turn, you could apply the energy zone energy to it, and then Dawn a fire energy onto it, and you're now dealing 80 damage up to 100 damage if they are weak to fire, let's say, against a grass deck, if you are brave enough to deal any damage to the Heat Ran. So the mind games on that are going to be quite insane. I really like that idea. Very cool. And then again, if they ignore this, you just pull it back for free if you have an Arceus on the field. Now, let's see what else is good here from Infernape. Gyarados, of course. Ooh, we got some Arceus in here. So here's a Gyarados with just playing Irida. Irida, nice boost to any water Pokemon, of course. So here's a nice full view of that. That's pretty much the only new thing in this deck. But if we look at the newer way to play Gyarados, even though that is post the new set, this is being used with an Arceus. We got 1 Arceus in there, plus the Irida. So it actually wasn't that crazy. Just randomly teching in an Arceus. Someone in the comments said that this is called Arceus. Is that true? I'd have to look that up. You tell me in the comments if I'm mispronouncing it or not, or if that mad lad's a fool. Now, what else we have here? What I see is Crobat. Crobat Arceus EX. This is going to be an exciting deck. As we can see here, out of 9 of them, 8 of them are being played with Darkrai EX. You can click on that filter there. And the one not playing with Darkrai EX, why are they not playing it? They're playing with Articuno teched in instead. So that's quite interesting. Let's try to figure out what this deck does and why it's doing so well. Despite not winning any recent tournaments, top 4 of a 100 player tournament's pretty good though. We'll check out this deck list. What's going on here is the Crobat is, once during your turn, if you have an Arceus on the field, you could deal 30 damage to your opponent's active Pokemon, and you could do this from the bench. And then you also have Darkrai EX. Whenever you attach the Darkness Energy to this Pokemon, deal 20 damage. So the idea is you are, from the bench, just smacking their active Pokemon for 50 damage every turn. That's going to be incredibly annoying. And I did talk about this in my early review, that it wasn't Darkrai versus Crobat. I believe that was the comparison I was talking about, or maybe it was something else, but that I was expecting to see Darkrai and Crobat be paired up together, which I think a lot of people obviously also saw themselves. So beyond that, very cool. Arceus giving it that additional ability. We're going to see a lot of different Arceus decks here, and we're working on splitting up the relevant Arceus decks into their own categories instead of grouping it up into just a single Arceus deck type. So Crobat, let's check out the win rates though. What strategy do you think this is going to be good against? Well, let's see. Win rates. Now, there's a good warning here. The meta is very early. And for some deck types, we have more than 20 plus battles worth of win rate data. But for this one, because it's not as popular as the other newer decks like Leafeon, you do want to take this into consideration. I did not think it would be good to show the win rate of anything with less than 10 battles. So I did completely disregard that, as I think Crobat has like 4 battles against a certain deck with like 100% win rate. That'd be bad to show, right? Do you agree? Now, positive win rate. We have a 62% win rate against Darkrai EX Magnezone. That's very nice. And an almost 60% win rate being at 58% against Leafeon EX Celebi, which I think is poised to be the new best deck. A very similar strategy to the Executor Celebi. And what's actually really interesting here is we have a positive win rate against Leafeon, but then a negative win rate against Executor, when I just said they are similar strategies. And they're similar in the way where you have Celebi on your bench and you are sitting with the tank Pokemon in the front. Now, Exeggutor is a better tank than Leafeon, but Leafeon is more aggressive than Exeggutor is what I'd be saying, is you're building up the Celebi much more easily. But we'll be looking into that. We'll be diving into that a bit more. And then we have a 37% win rate against Charizard, 40% win rate against Articuno. And then here are the deck stats on how the deck is being played. 11% are not playing Darkrai whatsoever. 100%, of course, are playing Arceus. 78% being played at 2. Very nice. Let's check. So you got a good view of the decks here and how the deck is played. We got Dawn in this deck also. We got Leaf being played here, sure. Leaf being played at 100% of the decks. We are leafing it up. The Crobat has a 0 retreat cost, and also Darkness Fangin for 50 damage in addition to dealing 30 with Cunning Link, which could be done from the bench. Nice. Very cool deck. I think I'd be interested in playing this. Now, what else is good here? Let's see. I actually broke the page here. No, I didn't break it, but I went off the page. So we're now back on the March. Now, we have Arceus EX. So this is where it's going to be a compilation of all the different Arceus EX decks that are not with Dialga and not Crobat. And if anything is going to be jumping out and forming as a popular way to play the deck, we'll then separate the deck type. Otherwise, for visibility purposes and for you learning to see what's doing well, we're going to keep it all together. So all 9 playing Arceus, of course. It looks like Magnezone is a contender for being split into its own deck type, being Arceus EX, Magnezone EX. So here are just some random Arceus decks. Heatran being played here. Looks like Heatran's being played in every single Magnezone version of the deck, but there is a Magnezone version of the deck that's not playing with Heatran. So that's going to be quite interesting, I guess. Yeah, we won't call it Arceus Heatran. We got some Carnivine. So let's try to figure out why are we not playing with Magnezone, and why are we playing with or without Heatran and Carnivine? Let's look into that real quick. So we could bring up one with Carnivine, one with Heatran, one without Magnezone, and I think that's going to be pretty much all of them. Here are these decks. So Tournament Toppin decks. We're also using Asian Tournament Toppin decks. So what's very cool about this is I'm seeing some Rotom. I compared Rotom with Heatran, where Rotom is the more aggressive version of Heatran. Heatran will be tanking damage, and Rotom will be aggressively using its dash attack, colorless, dealing 20 damage to a bench Pokemon. And then when you're done dash attack and you just retreat this for free, you'll have no retreat cost if you have an Arceus in the field. Now, what about the Carnivine, though? If you have an Arceus on the field, your Vine Whip for just 1 grass energy is going to be dealing an additional 30 damage. So for 50 damage, Vine Whip at 80 health, aggressively smacking the front line, and then aggressively dash attack in the back line as I guess you're building up your Arceus here. We got Shaman also. As long as this Pokemon's on your bench, your active Pokemon retreat cost is 1 less. So the Carnivine will essentially gain the benefit of the Speed Link ability, where you could retreat the Carnivine for free. And then if you wanted to retreat the Arceus, it would, of course, not be for free. It would be a 1 retreat cost. So pretty interesting version here. This would be designed to play Arceus without Dialga, which we're also going to be looking into that, without Crobat, without Magnezone. Pretty interesting way to play the deck. What's up with the grandma here? Put a random basic Pokemon from your discard pile into your hand. What I think is really something that should be pointed out here is when you're being aggressive with the Carnivine and not playing Erica, by the way, to heal the Carnivine, it's only going to give them 1 point. So if they finally deal with the Carnivine that's continually smacking for 50 damage every single turn, and it's not requiring you to evolve from the eggs like Exeggutor, so this is much more readily accessible. The downside having to have an Arceus in the field, it looks like you just Elder it back in the field potentially. Well, it would go back to the hand, then back in the field. So I'm curious how that plays out in a over many matches where you just Carnivine them to death. You take out their EX Pokemon, you get 2 points, they knock this out, you return it back, and then just go right back at it. That's got to be really annoying. Now, what else is good? We have the Heatran Magnezone. So the Heatran in this build. Now, I know it could be frustrating to not have the energy type of what they're using on the site, but a lot of tournaments, their deckless submissions, they're not submitting with what energy they are using. Otherwise, we could put in the notes for now what energy type they're using, but we could guess on what energy type they're using in this deck, and I would say it's just fire, nothing else. You don't need lightning because Magneton supplies the lightning energy. Arceus is colorless. Rotom is colorless energy to use its ability. And then Heatran will be for that Rage and Mad Strike for up to 80 damage if any damage is dealt to it. So you just tank with Heatran, and then Magnezone on the back line as it's building up with the Magneton alongside the Arceus. We got Cyrus here comboed up with the Rotom, dash attack the back row, then Cirrus pull it from the back row into the front line. The main thing you want to be thinking about with Heatran, the question is why? Why Heatran over, there's two other Pokemon that it's going to mainly be compared with, and that would be Druddigon and the Kangaskhan. Did I spell it correct? Kangaskhan. There we go. So the Druddigon, 100 base health versus 110. And then, of course, this deck is using fire energy to get that extra attack with the Heatran, which could then retreat for free. And then the Druddigon, you kind of, in order to make the most use out of Druddigon, because you're obviously not using Dragon Claw, you're going to need to play Leaf. So if you don't want to have to play Leaf in your deck to pull back the Druddigon that they're going to be ignoring, then you don't have an efficient way to retreat your Druddigon back, and that's going to be the main downside of playing Druddigon. As we can see in this deck list, no Leaf. We have Rocky Helmet to essentially give the ability of Druddigon to the Heatran anyway. That is a big deal. And Dawn also, which could randomly turn the Heatran on early if you want to get that damage out quickly, if they're brave enough to deal some damage to your Heatran. And then the more aggressive version of Druddigon was Kangaskhan. So if you wanted to be a more aggressive to get dizzy punch on the opponent, if you were afraid of them just ignoring your Druddigon, another problem is the retreat cost is at 3. So it does look like Heatran, in a way, is becoming the better option than Kangaskhan, and Druddigon is still, I would say, kind of the more defensive option, as the Rough Skin will guarantee that 20 damage if they attack into it. They're maybe more likely to ignore the Druddigon than the Heatran, as, I don't know, are they going to take that chance of you randomly having a Dawn? So, pretty cool. Then you Magnezone it up. Of course, this card is broken. 110 damage for free energy. 0, not 3, free, F-R-E-E energy, because the Magneton's going to give all of its energy for free. You could, of course, give it energy if you want to turn it on earlier. Let's see the other build here. Now, this is with Manify. Manify and Regagagas. What the heck is this? Raging Hammer for 50 damage, 4 colorless energy. This got top 16 in a 118-player event. This attack does more damage equal to the damage this Pokemon has on it. Ooh, and it's a basic Pokemon. I was just talking about the Heatran being a good, tanky Pokemon, and this thing is super tanky at 140 health. So what can we gather from this deck list? Well, it's playing Irida, and Irida, as we talked about earlier, is giving 40 health onto anything that has a water energy attached to it. And then we have Manify. So to even use the Manify, we're going to want to be playing water energy in this deck. So this would be a water energy deck only. We're not going to be putting in grass to get flopping for 30 damage, but Shaman will be healing for 10. And the Manify states that you choose 2 of your bench Pokemon. For each of those Pokemon, take a water energy from your energy zone and attach it to that Pokemon, not reliant on the Pokemon being a water-type Pokemon. And the same thing with Irida, not requiring a water-type Pokemon. It almost seems like an exploit, being able to use Manify and Irida with non-water Pokemon, being able to heal for 40 or supply them with energy. So very cool strategy we are seeing here. I'm very happy I was able to see this because I was not familiar with this card. Oh my Jesus, I got to put that in the engines. That's got to be highlighted. Now, the final Arceus deck here, before we get into the other ones, so similar to what we talked about earlier, but this is going to be with the Carnivine and the Magnezone. So Vine Whip them for 50, smack them with the Magnezone, and as you're continually dealing with these very powerful non-EX Pokemon, you're only gaining 1 point for defeating them. And then the Shaman, it looks like Shaman is quite important to be used with the Carnivine to ensure that the Carnivine will be a free retreat. All right, that's good to see. So do consider that if you want to play Carnivine in your deck, obviously alongside the Arceus to give it that extra 30 damage. Now, back to the other deck list here. Is anything new happening with the Executor? No, it's being played the same way. It is still winning tournaments. I mean, here's a smaller tournament example. Let's go to the tournament deck type breakdown. Looks like it's the same deal. 100% playing Celebi, mostly being played at 1. Here are some good recent tournament examples. You could highlight or click on any of them. The highlight feature is actually a Meta Pro feature if you want to support the site, I think for $2 a month. We do have updated win rates against top decks, though. We are clapping up with, so if you have the good old reliable deck and you don't want to touch the new set, well, the deck is still good as it's clapping Crobat. It's, Darkrai EX Greninja, not new, unless I guess they might be playing Iridel. Well, we may check that out later. Clapping up Pachirisu, which is also doing well against some of the newer decks. Doing, not completely clapping up Articuno, kind of an even win rate there, only at 55. Now, the downside of your new deck, so if you did not touch the new pack, you're going to be disappointed to see that you, of course, knew you were losing a Charizard because you're a grass-type deck, and maybe you're okay with that, but are you now okay that you're losing to a prevalent new top deck? 26% win rate against Arceus EX, Dialga EX. We're going to look at that deck type possibly up next. And then Palkia, newly being boosted by Irida. That's not so good. So what's going on here? Why are we beating Articuno, close to half of 50% win rate, but then much more unfavorably losing to Palkia EX? And then also, this doesn't look good. A 43% win rate against Leafeon. So, boy, that's essentially three new decks, or at least a deck that got new support, is beating your top tier deck from just the very last set. And this could be the fear of power creep with any card game. You go all in, you invest into a top tier deck, which this was and still is currently the best deck until we get enough data throughout this week. It's just going to automatically update through all the community tournaments, and it's also taking into consideration the size of the tournament, essentially taking the top 30% of each event and then applying it to this tier list. So, yeah, I do expect this deck to fall, but how far? Maybe down to tier 2 and may settle there. But, Pokemon Pocket, in a way, is very closely tied to rock, paper, scissors, where if your worst matchup becomes the most popular way to play the game, then you're going to just be dropping in power level and relevance and prevalence within the events. But then you have to jump to the deck that beats whatever the deck that beats you, and then you just go around in a freaking circle, rock, paper, scissors, over and over. And that's why I think tournaments should maybe be evolving into multiple different decks with maybe you have to win with all the decks you play, but then you could argue that's also going to be random and, wishy-washy with the rock, paper, scissors-ish stuff. Now, let's move on from here. Nothing really changed with the Executor, and we'll see what's up next. We already talked about Articuno. We jumped around up to there. Darkrai EX Magnezone, another older deck. Is it being used with anything new? We have one out of the 18 tournament tops recently. We got a first place here. One of them playing Arceus. Is just random. Are we randomly teching it in? It does look like we just randomly have an Arceus on the team. Cool to see it. Okay. Arceus could be kind of like a tank, right? It's a 140 base health. That's not so bad. It's 2 points for your opponent if they defeat it. That's why I probably have a leaf here to pull it back potentially. Well, the Kangaskhan's only going to give that 1 point, and you can't ignore the Kangaskhan. So the retreat cost is not that big of a deal because I'll just dizzy punch you all day as I continually also poke you with the Darkrai EX as I also build up the Magnezone. But this is an older strategy by a month now, not too old. And let's see the updated win rates here. So, of course, understand with this deck, Darkrai EX with Magnezone only uses Dark Energy. Magneton will self-supply 3 to 4 plus energy. And also, great news with this deck is that the Magnezone is now tradable, where otherwise it was not. So good on them for allowing us to trade quickly for the pack that was, just the last one back and not having to wait even longer. Now, let's see, win rate versus top decks. And I do want to really highlight that. A lot of you may be thinking, oh, well, that's expected. Not if you play a game like Duel Links, where they have a ticket system where you could essentially get a free card, which I would compare kind of to the trade system in Pokemon Pocket. And that ticket system is really strict. You can't expect to use a ticket to get a free card, not until I believe, like 3-4 months after it's been out before you even have a chance to spend your ticket on it. And maybe someone who has a better memory than me in the comments could tell me that it's actually worse than what I described, or maybe I'm on point, or maybe it got better since last time I played. You tell me. Now, here are the win rates. Pachirisu. We got to look at Pachirisu. I was going to be skipping over this, but let's check it out. And so we do have a 69% win rate against Pachirisu. Nice. And then we have a good positive win rate, 60% win rate against the new Arceus EX Dialga EX, which we talked about, the Dialga Arceus deck having a good win rate against the Executor Celebi deck. And then we have a positive win rate against Charizard, which also has a good win rate against the Celebi Executor deck. So this will also obviously be a good win rate against Leafeon, which I'm excited to get to soon. I feel like it's been a, we got to get to. I just have this build up. I think Leafeon's probably the deck I'm most excited for. And we do have a negative win rate against Leafeon, 42% win rate. A horrid win rate against Articuno EX. What is going on here? The Articuno is clapping up this deck despite not having a weakness to water. What the heck is going on there? You tell me. And then here are all the tournament ways the deck's being played, the samples. Now, let's move on. Let's quickly look at the Pachirisu. Is anything newly being played with this? It's not being played with, not being played with, I would say, Arceus, as you could see here. Yeah, it's just the best lightning type deck. Instead of playing Pikachu, Pachirisu is the way. So if you're just thinking about when to play some lightning, this is what you'd want to be playing, which is quite unfortunate for Pikachu and also a deck like Mewtwo to no longer be good. What is pretty cool, though, is that Charizard is standing the test of time. Did not get replaced by a fire-type Pokemon like Infernape. Let's see what else is good. Let's go back and over to the top decks. Let's click on March here. And from here, we could finally go into Arceus Dialga EX, and then we'll be talking about Palkia and Leafeon, the top 3 decks, the top 3 new decks. So this is where you're asking, what should I invest into with this new set? Well, obviously, Arceus, and then, if not obvious, also Leafeon. So Leafeon and Arceus are the 2 winners, and also Irida, Arceus, and Leafeon. So we could do up here, you could do the Triumphant Light, and look at that, exactly what I just said. It sorts by the popularity of tournament top and deck lists, and Arceus is number 1 most used, followed by Irida in tournament top and decks, and then followed by Leafeon. So these are the top 3 of what you should be aiming for to get and pull from your pack. And yep, it's all within the same pack, of course, just 1 Triumphant Light. Good that they did not split it up into 2. So now let's check out the Arceus EX Dialga. So of course, all 18 are playing Dialga, but what's interesting here is almost half are playing Mew EX. We should maybe look at a tournament winning deck list here, right? Here's one that got first place. Let's look on the other page here. Another first place. We have a first place with Mew, first place without Mew. We could also, of course, go to the tournament deck type breakdown here. We could also check out the win rates. So before we get to the win rates, let's try to figure out how this deck even works. So here's the top sample way to play the deck with all the percentages, and then also the decks here where you could sort with and without Mew if you cared to do that. So with Mew, not playing Mew, depending on whether you have Mew or not. You could also set that up in your card collection, and then that could help you see what you own and don't own with your collection. Very easy to do that. So let's see this deck. Dialga. So we already know the Arceus, giving additional benefits to other Pokemon that mention Arceus, but that's not the case in this deck. So why is this a good deck? Well, let's look at the Dialga EX. Take 2 Metal Energy from your Energy Zone and attach it to one of your benched Pokemon. So we're obviously going to have the Dialga EX in the active spot, and you would think you're supposed to be playing this with a Metal type energy, right? A Metal type Pokemon, that is. Well, Colorless is going to work. So Ultimate Force is going to get boosted by the Metallic Turbo. And when you're done boosting up your Arceus, if you're playing Mew, then you could set up Mew for the genome hacking, getting ready to copy the ability of one of the opponent's active Pokemon to then use it on them. Very cool indeed. I like this idea. Interesting. And then it's good to see that you don't need Mew. You could, we got Shaman in this deck build here. They got first place. Shaman, heal up your Pokemon by 10. Metallic Turbo, boost up the energy on your Arceus, and just build up enough energy for the heavy impact. If not, you got the Arceus that's going to be pretty much building energy for free or much more quickly than the opponent thanks to the Metallic Turbo. It's also crazy that the Metallic Turbo also does 30 damage in addition to giving you 2 metal energies onto your bench. We got Leaf, to quickly pull the Dialga off of the main spot. We could also attach a Rocky Helmet onto the Dialga, then heal it up a bit with the Shaman, heal up a bit with the Potion. I guess my concern with this deck was thinking that you need a full benched Pokemon, full bench that is, to even make the best use out of your Arceus EX to deal that 130 damage. So something like the Shaman definitely helps out with that. So we can now check out the win rates. So I guess it's maybe between Mew and Shaman, or maybe using both together. I think I'll add Shaman to an engine. So even though you could highlight or click on each deck and see, it does seem to be that's the case though. Without Mew, you play Shaman. With Mew, you don't have to play it, or you may play both, as you can see here. Even in this one's playing the colorless Shaman. Now, let's see. Win rates. Negative win rate, 39% against Darkrai EX Magnezone. 47% win rate against Articuno. It's quite even. I'm not going to say that we straight up lose to Articuno. And we have a great win rate against the top tier deck of the premium format, that is, previous, not premium. Previous format, Executor Celebi EX. 71% win rate against Charizard EX. So, wow, not only do you clap up the grass decks, including the brand new Leafeon EX Celebi EX deck, 64% win rate, but you're also clapping up Charizard that's being used to beat the grass decks. Think of that mindset. You pick Charizard to eat up grass, but then the Arceus Dialga deck eats up Charizard and the grass at the same time. How does that happen? That's crazy that that's just happens to be the win rate for this deck. So good job on that. Of course, this will be updating throughout as the meta further develops, and people are newer to the decks and the meta, and people probably making big misplays against the decks as they're not too familiar. So let's go back on over here. We have Palkia EX. Now, I think people are quite negative towards this deck because they're negative towards Articuno. They don't like this idea of playing just one Pokemon and then 18 supporter cards or 18 trainer cards, 18T, as people say. And that's kind of what Palkia is doing. Now, a lot of them are playing Articuno, and it looks like a lot of them are also playing Manaphy, but also, like this first place winning deck list, what I just said is not playing any other Pokemon besides Palkia. So you have a lot of options here. We got the alt art of the Irida, alt art of Misty, alt art of Cyrus, and crown rarity Palkia, and then winning a tournament. Absolute Chad energy here. Very nice, incredibly intimidating. So let's look on the Palkia EX breakdown here. We see, let's look at the win rates. Negative win rate against Articuno EX. We do have very limited battles data for this deck type, only 10 to 20 battles for the win rates here. Anything less than 10, we're not reporting. So we do want to be checking back on this as we get a lot more data with this. But even with this limited data, we have at least 10 battles against Leafeon EX, and Leafeon Celebi is losing. We got an 80% win rate against a grass type deck, where, in the Pokemon game itself, grass is supposed to beat water, so what the heck's going on? Obviously not a thing in this game. And then we have 58% win rate against Executor Celebi, 53, almost close to a coin flip against Darkrai Magnezone. So here are the multiple different ways to play the deck. Make sure you're checking out the engines here. This is going to be played with Manaphy, Articuno, if you want to play with other Pokemon or no Pokemon, or even playing Arceus in the deck here. This deck type really is all over the place on how the deck is being played. So I would say my question to all of you, for potential better clarity, you let me know, should we separate solo Palkia and turn the Palkia deck type into its own deck alongside the Manaphy Vaporeon strategy possibly, maybe even a third Palkia deck type where it's being played with Articuno? You let me know, or maybe you like it as this is, as long as this is a good way for you to gauge how the meta is developing and you feel like a deck is not unfairly shooting up on the tier list because of us grouping up different ways to play the deck. But, that's dependent on how you would all like to better understand this, and I'll be paying attention to it too and seeing how other people are wanting this to be done. Now, what is supposedly the best deck currently, by a little, not by a lot, is Leafeon EX Celebi. All 20 of the Leafeon tournament top and decks here are going to be playing with Celebi. Let's see what is going on here. We're going to go straight to the Leafeon deck type breakdown to see exactly how this is being played. So if you want to play this, 85% are playing it with one Celebi, and we have some being played at 2. So there is a trick if you wanted to see that specifically. How do you check out the ones played at 2? So if you highlight this information button, it tells you that if you do a star, and then it uses a Yu-Gi-Oh card for an example, we'll type star, Celebi, and we got to do the wrong way. Celebi star 2. Here are the decks where Celebi is being played at 2. And then, of course, you could set it to 1 or 2. So that's a cool little trick there. Here is where it's being played at 2. I expect it to be very similar to the other deck builds here. And why is this strategy even working out? We're going to have to compare it to another similar strategy, which was the best strategy of the last set, Executor EX Celebi. So what would happen with this deck on why it's so powerful is you would tank with Executor at 160 health. And with 160 health, you have Erica, in addition to Potion, healing up your Executor. As for just a single Grass Energy, you're Tropical swinging for 40 to 80 damage. So we could just say on average, this is dealing 60 damage for one Grass Energy, but you do have to evolve this stage 1. But that is similar to Leafeon, where you have to evolve it from Eevee. And while you only commit one energy to the Executor, the longer you don't deal with Executor, the larger the Celebi gets on the bench. Celebi has infinite scaling. What other Pokemon could say they have infinite scaling? I believe Blastoise has infinite scaling, right? What other Pokemon is able to infinitely deal more damage the longer the game goes? Now, unfortunately, Blastoise is not considered good, but with the Celebi, every energy attached to this Pokemon gives you an extra coin flip to deal 50 damage per heads. So I'll just say it, if we want to average this out, tell me if this is good math, it's real basic math. Each energy is 25 damage. So every turn, the Celebi is gaining 25 damage on average. After, so at 4 energy, we're going to be on average dealing 100 damage with the Celebi. And it really turns on the heat of having to deal with this Executor quickly. That's why we're wanting to use Charizard, as it's weak to fire and, to flame them down. And then what's really annoying is that Erica keeps on healing. Now, if you thought that this was a problem where you're essentially on the clock of the Celebi becoming so large and in charge that it's one-shotting all your Pokemon, what's going on with Leafeon? This is where it gets crazy. So Leafeon is weaker than the Executor at 140 health, and its Solar Beam requires 3 energy to activate for 70 damage, where I was talking about the Executor essentially on average dealing 60 damage for just 1 Grass Energy. So the Tropical Swing is obviously way better than the Solar Beam. And then, but the ability though, once during your turn, if this Pokemon is in the active spot, you may take a Grass Energy from your Energy Zone and attach it to any of your Grass Pokemon. You essentially, this is the Superior, right? Superior? Serp. So the Serp is going to be, each Grass Energy provides 2 Grass Energy. So in a way, it's kind of like Superior, but the Leafeon is much more easily summoned and can be used as your tank, as you do have to activate this in the active spot. So what we have here is a more aggressive strategy. If you want to play more defensive, more slowly building up your Celebi as you're tanking with the Executor, or if you want to be aggressively building up that Grass Energy onto your Celebi to much more quickly turn it online. Now, the retreat cost for this is only 1. And here is something that's insane about this deck that the Executor deck, I don't believe, is making use of. They can't. And that is, what is that? Irida. Not all of them are playing Irida. And maybe that's because they don't know that this entire deck can just use water energy. No Grass Energy whatsoever. As the Irida plus Erica can heal the Leafeon and Celebi, as your Energy Zone is going to give the water energy, and the Leafeon will be the sole provider of the Grass Energy itself, allowing you to make use of the Irida. This is very similar to the Magneton ability. That is absolutely insane. Now, let's see what's going on here. We could see here all the different tournament top and decks. If we want to search by Irida, let's type in Irida. And we have a first place deck list abusing and using the Irida strategy. If I'm playing this deck myself, I would be testing out with Irida first to see how well that works, playing with water energy. And maybe you have good experience with that in the comments. Let me know if this strategy has teeth to it. Is it a gimmick? Is it actually going to become the most powerful strategy? And if you're not using Irida and you have a good reason for not using it, I would love to also know that. Maybe it's taking up room for another supporter card that's much better to have. So, because in order to put in Irida, it's taking away from the rest of the deck, right? So let's see. Irida, we have Erica 100% at 2, Pokeball, Professor Research, of course. Sabrina and Cyrus is, Sabrina being used more than the Cyrus here. We're going to look at the win rates here. Giant Cape, Irida, Potion, and Erica. Holy sustain. That is crazy sustain. Forever keeping that Leafeon alive. That's going to be wild. And then some Mad Lads, if 40%, or I should say 55% of people are playing Rocky Helmet to reflect damage with the Leafeon. That is crazy. Now let's check out the win rate. Boom. Let's zoom this out so you can see both of them. Positive win rate. I'm going to jump right to this. So if you were to be asking, what's the better deck, Executor or Leafeon? Well, Leafeon has a 56, almost 57% win rate against Executor. That does not mean the deck is better. You cannot look at that and go and think of that. You have to think about this. Think about 100 duels of what the meta is. And overall, even though we have a better matchup, a positive matchup against Executor, does Executor have an overall better matchup within 100 duels of the entire meta of different decks? And we don't know yet. I think it's too early to tell. And the best way to see which deck is actually better is going to be the tier list. So does this mean right now Executor is better? No, because Leafeon just came out. So we do have to wait after 1 week. It's only going to take 1 week to really see if Executor is going to maintain its strength, or if Leafeon will surpass it, or if both are just going to be similarly played at the same level of tournament tops. Now, of course, this is not taking into account, this is not a popularity contest of just people entering tournaments with a deck type. It is showcasing the tournament top decks only. Only what's topping a tournament, the top 30% of a tournament. It is taking into account the size of a tournament also. So make sure you keep track of that and also checking out the win rates of the deck as we continually update that. And we have a 55% win rate against Articuno, 57% win rate against Darkrai EX Magnezone. Now, what is the bad news? 20% win rate against Palkia. Holy moly, Palkia, what is going on? And then Arceus EX Dialga, not so good win rate against a deck that I think a lot of people are going to be excited to be playing. This is, I would say, is maybe a less accessible deck. I don't know. You tell me. I don't know how many people really went in and pulled for Dialga, or maybe that's a highly sought after card that everyone's trading for since this deck is turning out to be a top tier deck alongside Leafeon. So people that wanted Celebi already have Celebi, and then a lot of trades for Dialga are going to be going up. Charizard, of course, Charizard eats the grass, blows it up, flame on, and just like that. So I think that is going to be the conclusion of what is going on with the meta here. Are there any randomness happening here? Let's check out first place randomness with the new meta. Random Weevil deck getting first place. What's going on here? 118 player event using nothing new. And I'm happy to see this. We shouldn't only see the newer cards continually do better and better and better. We want to feel like our investment in time into the older decks are going to carry us long enough into the future. I'm sure it's inevitable that everything's going to get power crept. I don't know exactly how it's done in the Pokemon TCG to deal with that. You let me know in the comments. But Weevil EX randomly winning a torrent, that's cool. Pachirisu, the best way to play Lightning, cool. Good job to you. Beyond that, it doesn't seem like anything is too crazy. Palkia is kind of a bit cheating here. While it looks like it's got the most tournament wins, only 3 of them are solo Palkia, which again, I may separate the deck type, and the other one is with the Vaporeon Articuno. So it's quite a bit a different strategy. So I may, right after this video, actually end up separating them to have that better clarity of solo Palkia being the best way to play or not. And then Articuno, this one also teching in a random. This is pretty interesting. It's one Articuno, one Palkia, one of each. And so if you have a question of who do I play Articuno or Palkia, the answer is yes, both. Just one of each is a possible way to play it and do well and even win a tournament. That is wild. That is so funny. Good job to that. I guess let's end this on comparing the Palkia and Articuno real quick. Palkia, 4 energy, 150 damage, discarding 3 energy from this, obviously a lot more damage. That's all I really want to say with that. Also, dealing 20 damage to your opponent's bench Pokemon, obviously a much more powerful ability, but it's much more sustainable to be using Blizzard instead. Palkia's got 10 more health. And, you know, there's a lot of comparisons here, and the biggest thing is just use both if you're unsure, okay? So stay up to date with PokemonMeta.com with either the tier list or the top decks page. You could sort by the new cards of what's doing well or what's not. And you can also check out the Discord. Sorry for the flashbang. In the Discord, you're going to be able to set up trades with other players, very easily trading for what you want to do. I was able to easily trade for a lot of the older cards like Celebi and whatnot to get my decks up to date with that. And now I'm going to have to possibly be trading again for the latest set. Even though I put in $100 in the last set, and I think that was pretty much enough to get almost everything I want, and I not through what I wanted, but I pulled a ton of Dialgas. I think I pulled like 4 Dialgas from the last set, so I'm already set on the new Arceus Dialga deck. That's pretty cool. And also make sure you add whales to your friend list, as that's currently the only working exploit to have the best wonder packs possible, to always have a whale on your friend list where you can no longer add them after they open the good packs. They have to already be on your friend list as they're opening the good packs. That was something that they definitely wanted to fix. So thank you very much for watching this video. I greatly appreciate you all very much. I'll see you in the Discord. Possibly I'll be making some battle videos. And I also want to say that I am excited for Pokemon Champions. Holy moly. This coming to not only the Switch or the mobile. If it was only mobile, huge red flag. If it was only Nintendo Switch, a red flag, but not as big as just being on mobile. It being on both, damn. That's great to hear. And the best thing I heard from the trailer about Pokemon Champions is that they said that their goal is to make Pokemon battles more accessible to more people around the world. And that has been my #1 gripe with Pokemon battles, is that it was not accessible enough to regular people hopping in. I don't think it's good for a PvP game to queue up at the lowest level of the game, let's say bronze tier, and you're playing against fully optimized teams. They have the best EVs, the best IVs, the best abilities, the best meta comps right away. That's not accessible for new players. We need noobs to be able to be thriving within the bronze tiers of a game, and hopefully something like that will happen in Pokemon Champions. I will make a prediction though, and you may not like this. I think that there's a chance that Pokemon Champions will, in a way, replace the EV-IV system for maybe something a lot more easier to grasp, like maybe stars. Like maybe you have 10 stars or 10 points that you could put into health, speed, and damage, where it's, instead of it being 300 points you're individually distributing between each one. Of course, there'll be a cap where, let's say, you only put like 3 or 4 points into health. I think that's something that they will possibly be exploring to make it less necessary to have to breed a perfect Pokemon. I just think that it's going to be, I think it'll be easier to pick your Pokemon and make your Pokemon than it is right now. All right, so you let me know what you think about that or not. And I do plan on covering this and possibly doing weekly tournaments and all that good stuff. And maybe working on a website for this too would be a good idea if this actually turns out to be a good thing. And, you know, they won with Pokemon Pocket. It was a big win. That was definitely made Pokemon TCG more accessible on a broader scale to globally a lot more people. And I think this is now the same thing. They got to do this with Pokemon battling. Yep. So thank you very much. We are out. I'll see you in the next video. Let's go.